So welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're doing a crowdfunding preview of Race to Berlin 2nd edition from Portal Games. The original edition of this was put out by...
I can't remember.
Okay. But did it have
I
wide
want to say it was
distribution?
Bonsai Games, but I don't believe so.
Okay. So I think for most people who are going to be watching this or seeing this on crowdfunding, it is new to them. I think
Yes.
for most people. So this is a 2-player strategic war game / racing game.
Sure. It definitely is a war game because it has lots of combat, supply, everything's revolving around that push to Berlin.
But this is a game of speed
to
executing all that stuff. But it's 2-player. I'm going to play as like the Soviets, you're going to play as the Allies, and I as the Soviets control the Germans on the Western Front, and you as the Allies control the Germans on the Eastern Front. So if you've played something like Downfall is
From
the
GMT.
most recent game that uses that kind of idea. There's a few others.
I think the original was called like Battle for Germany, I believe.
Something like that. But I also think one of the SES games
does something similar.
Yeah, A Mighty Endeavor also did that,
Okay.
I think.
Sorry, we are going a little down memory lane of talking about comparable games.
But that's the conceptual idea of this, is I'm trying to race to Berlin, so are you, but I also control the forces trying to stop you doing that.
And I do think control is a very interesting term, right? You really can't do a lot with the German forces. You can do a little.
Yeah.
It's mainly defending. You do have some cards. You do also have your ability to place some of your command blocks with them, allowing for them to then do some offensive, some movement.
But they attack very poorly comparatively.
100% agree.
And they defend, you can get some decent-ish defenses, but the reality is the Germans are a speed bump, a roadblock to the major forces. Like,
just trying to slow advance. That's it.
And it's, can I slow you down more than you can slow me down?
Yeah.
You will never stop either one of these forces. It is a race game. Like, you will overwhelm the Germans. Both of you are going to end up doing it.
Yeah.
It's just a case of, it's a game of speed. It's a game of efficiency, right?
Well, and to me, we discussed this. Historically, that's what this was, right? The battle for Berlin was not a really fair fight. It was overwhelming force on both the West Front and the East Front coming together, Germans just falling back. I mean, ultimately in the end, it was...
Once they were fighting in Berlin, it was the writings on it was done anyway.
Well, yeah.
Like, you were fighting for fanaticism.
I think the reason I bring that up is because it was a lot of the defending German forces at that point of the war were, the Volkssturm.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Old people.
It was
sick,
whoever they could get.
Children, yeah.
And it was...
Which is a crime. I get that, but
But know that this is a game of, I am trying to crush what's in front of me and get to Berlin before you do that. That's what this game is. This isn't the Allies fighting the Soviets in that way. It's, can I clear the way and get there before you do that? Yeah. And that's, again, we've played a couple of games that use that, and it's a fun and interesting dynamic. It's something that's different from a lot of the, here's my guys, here's your guys, we're fighting, right?
Because it would have been very easy for the designer to ultimately do that, right? Make the Germans static.
Yeah, someone plays the Germans and someone plays the Allied forces, and it was like, okay.
But what I'm saying is the defending Germans could have been static, but we actually had a little bit of a modicum of control where we could do some things. I think that's neat. I also think it's a novel approach that we've seen in a couple of other games.
Yeah.
And I like that Christoph did that.
But yeah, one of the great parts about this is these logistics blocks. Because you do it like a hidden block game. You have 8 of them, they're numbered 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you got 2 of each. And it's, you go through the logistics phase, standing them up, and they're hidden from the other player. So you don't know where I'm concentrating my forces, and I don't know where you're concentrating your forces. How many do I commit as offensive Soviet forces, and how many do I commit as defensive German forces? There's a lot of decision space in there. And that was something that, as we were kind of playing that first round, was really exciting to me.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of choice and a lot of things to consider.
Yeah.
How do I want to approach this game? Do I want to go as hard as I humanly can? Or do I want to go like really heavy German defense? What does that look like?
Sure.
And so in the end, you've got to weigh up where does victory come from? It comes from Berlin. So you go heavy attack. But
yeah, if you put all your resources into your German cohort's defense, you don't have the resources then to make any progress.
You will lose the game.
Yourself. Yeah.
But if you put nothing, then
you're going to lose the game.
You'll lose the game because they will steamroll
100%.
the nothing that you've put out there. And so finding that little balance, or what do you put out? How much strength do you commit? The number of blocks? Do you go for like a bluff? Do you put like some weak things and it's like, or do you put something in like a weird place to threaten a counterattack so they can't bleed off all their forces and do something else?
And we had those discussions as we were playing the game and kind of after we played the game, because I do think that is one of the best parts of the design. The concept of, and the way you put your command blocks out, I think is important, right? It's
the most important thing.
Yeah, it's an I go, you go, starting with the Soviets. The Soviets are going to put one of their command blocks out hidden somewhere on the board, either on their space with their troops or on the opposite front with the Germans that are defending, right? Then I get to put one of mine out and I have the same choice. So it's a game of cat and mouse where you're trying to decide what you want to do and how you want to defend, and then I'm trying to, in some ways, react and counter-react to that. I liked the way that worked out. I think that was a good way to do that. And I was a little nervous with that at first. But ultimately, as we did that, that led to a big source of the immediate tension in the game.
Yeah.
Ooh, what does he have there? Is his 5 up here in Leningrad? Is his 5 down here? Or
like, oh, he put a piece down in Italy.
What's he going to do?
Well, I've got to put something down there to defend.
Yeah.
How much do I put down there? How much did he put down there?
You put a 3. And ultimately, I think I put a 3 as well, but this is a 2.
Yeah, but so you get into that like, oh, I'm going to go over here. You're like, oh, okay, well, I have to react to that.
Yeah.
And that's a neat part of the game. I would love to see some optional stuff where you had maybe
a dummy
one.
Yeah.
Or
that would have been
or
great.
A strength value that was a D6. So you had so there was a little bit more flexibility because I had the same numbers as you had. We were very symmetric in that way.
Yeah.
But having a little bit more of like some bluff or some jeopardy and some of those things, that's a really easy option you could add that would like totally add much more flavor to that kind of stuff.
It would add a layer of depth that would just create some additional
fun moments, right?
Interesting things, considerations. I think that's what the game is really focused a lot on, is that concept of how do I do what I want to do? Where do I do it? Where do I counteract what he's trying to do?
Yeah.
And you're not going to win with the Germans, right? You're not going to.
No, you're
not going to stop the Soviets and stonewall them. It's just not going to happen. I guess it could theoretically, but it's going to be real difficult.
Unless you purposefully don't double up on your attack values.
Sure.
And only attack at the worst conceivable points.
Moment, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
They're not a stopping force, they're a slowing force.
And it's interesting, you and I also talked about this, coming at this game in the mind of a wargamer, because that's what we do.
Yep.
I think we played this very differently than other types of gamers would have probably approached this.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny because we both made a beeline.
We played Race to Berlin.
We did. Exactly like it says on the tin.
They've got the whole rest of Germany. They've got northern Italy. They've got all this other stuff.
Really matter.
And that was one of the things with the game that was like, okay, you can win at the end of 3 turns, and whoever's got the most victory points wins.
Yeah.
I don't think the game's ever going to get there because you beeline to Berlin.
Yep.
You can do that pretty reasonably, especially through 3 turns.
Well, we both were right there.
At the end of turn
1. You were in Berlin. I was just on the outskirts. Because, and we had this conversation, Allies have the Western Allies, I keep saying the Allies, the Soviets were allies too. The Western Allies had one additional space to go through. They also, I thought, had a little bit of a tougher row to hoe over here because some of the defensive values. Yours was a little more direct. I think you're going to get there a little quicker, but that doesn't mean it's over, right? With good block placement from the Germans, there's the threat of counterattack. There's the threat of all those kind of things that will ultimately make you lose your combat supply, which will sink you for that turn because everything is fed by your combat supply.
Yeah, and there's some interesting things where, like, one player can end the turn if they remove all of their blocks from the board.
But that's going to take 7, 8
right,
turns.
but you can because there's so much open information in this. If you can see someone's really threatening that,
sure,
and you're keeping on top of that, you know, you could make it so maybe it's 5 turns because you're taking them off a little bit earlier than we were doing.
Right.
And where you're like, cool, you have an advantage, but I can at least end the turn so you don't win.
Yeah.
And so then we can reset and, like, maybe I can get the jump on you or something. But
agreed.
So there's some interesting bits to that, but we played Race to Berlin.
We did.
We both raced to Berlin.
Yeah.
And because that's the auto win. If you take Berlin, you win. And so the rest of the game, it's a little inconsequential.
Well, the victory point concept, which there are,
there's 4 on each side, and then but whoever has Berlin wins.
Yeah.
So, like, you just go for Berlin because it is within striking distance of both players,
right,
and it's that valuable that. And, like, if you haven't taken your victory points by the end of turn 3, what are you doing anyway? Because they're all very achievable.
They are.
That's the reality of it.
In fact, I think after the end of one turn here, we got a majority of them.
Yeah,
you didn't have this one yet.
No, I had 2, and I was
have this one yet,
and I had 2 to go. You had,
I think I got 3
with 1 to go.
Yeah,
but, like, that doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
That doesn't
because
score until the end of turn 3.
Yeah,
I'm 1 space, 2 space,
100%,
and then, like, but who cares? Because I'm going to have taken Berlin. And
sure.
So that because that's it's a zero sum. Like, whoever has Berlin wins.
These don't really matter.
It dilutes the value of those other victory spaces.
Sure.
So it's like, cool.
So that was something I think we tried to think of ways that could be changed. Very similar to the concept of us saying, hey, a dummy block would have been good. I think adding some type of additional incentive down here.
Or Berlin is worth a number of victory points.
Sure. Like 2.
Yeah, if that's worth
everything
2,
else is 1.
You still have to secure everything else.
Yeah.
But then you end up with then it's still whoever has Berlin wins, right?
Sure.
Because we are not able to attack each other. So whoever gets in there gets in there.
Well, and the reality is someone that gets there first, if you take these 2, both the northern approach to Berlin and the southern approach to Berlin, you then lock me out of Berlin.
Yeah, and so
there's no way to get you out of there with the exception of counterattacking with German. But that would be hard.
So it forces you to commit really hard to the German counterattack, but the German counterattack, no matter how hard you commit, is still not very good.
It's not great. Yeah, it's not great.
It's just they're much weaker than the other forces.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So, but that plays into, like, the game is you simply cannot allow that to happen.
Right.
You must race to Berlin as well, and if you don't do it and they race there before you, the game's pretty much over at that point because all the time and effort you're going to spend counterattacking with the Germans, they're hammering on B1 space and they'll have won it by the time you can do anything. So there's some interesting stuff there, but it forces you once again into Race to Berlin.
Yep.
And so
which is what the game is called.
You cannot get away from that. That's what the game is. But it was like, we set up all this cool stuff and I was excited to do all this other stuff. It's kind of a sideshow and you just, like, don't really focus on it. Because the first few turns, we were doing stuff down here. I was like, I just want to, like, probe and see the mechanics. Then it was like, let's just beeline it to Berlin.
Now, once again, the shrewd placement of a couple of blocks here and there will make a little bit of a difference because ultimately, if I can counterattack you and, although it's very hard, we said that already, if I can force you to lose a couple of your supply points, that makes it more and more difficult for you to attack. Because you don't have enough.
Or I do attack all those things and it just absorbs more of my resources to get you out of there because you have a good, nice defensive block. Cool. Then the game goes, to the end of turn 2, or maybe
Yeah.
to turn 3 before someone gets to Berlin. But
Sure.
like, I think this is always going to end with someone getting Berlin.
No, I would.
I don't
I
think
that's
you're going.
World War II was going to come to an end. This is going to come to an end in
Yeah.
the very same way. One of the other concepts that I want to point out, I think before we talk about the combat system, which I thought was very cool,
Yeah,
unique,
it was neat.
interesting, light, but fun. Somebody, when I posted a couple of pictures of this, someone said, "Oh, it's Ticket to Ride, Germany or
Yeah.
Berlin, whatever."
Or it looks like Race to the Rhine.
Yeah, but
Very
it's
similar
really
name.
not.
It's like neither of those.
Yeah.
Like it's got the spaces and it's got the like
Little blocks, little
logs,
sticks.
but this is your army frontage.
Yeah, it represents your, kind of like on a strategic.
like it looks awesome.
Yeah, it does.
And it was very satisfying.
Oh,
doing
very
it.
to move it. The other key thing about those is you only have a limited amount of those,
Yes.
so you can't, like, it ultimately stopped me because I futzed around here too much. I could not get into Berlin that first time because I didn't have enough sticks to capture that front.
Yeah, if your
which is a
front looks like
limitation.
this with all
Yep.
these bulges,
Which it does.
literally takes up your troops.
Yep.
And you cannot advance more. You have to consolidate your lines.
Yep.
So I love that, and like that's such a great thing. I
Yep.
love elements like that are in this game. That's really simple, but the way that it forces you to move a little more broadly, you
Yeah.
can get away with it in like one area to Berlin. But I really liked that concept, and that was fun to do. And there's the limit to these cubes that you have.
There's 20 of them, but
Which is-
I felt like we had a lot.
That's a lot. We thought
We
maybe
each had
I would play with handcuffs on, and I would take out maybe 6, 7, or 8
Nah, I
from
think
each side.
3 or 4 would be enough to. I think.
don't.
You don't think
I was
so?
never in much jeopardy.
Well, I'm down to just 1.
Yeah, but you take that 5 block off, and you got 6.
Yeah, I got- yeah.
And so because
Yeah.
then you get into a tighter action economy of like,
Yep.
I do some attacks, then I withdraw a block to get some of those cubes back.
Right.
And so that cedes the initiative for a turn back to someone
Yeah.
whilst you're just doing nothing.
Well, I think that little rule tweak would really sum up the logistical problem that they had. Getting goods to port, from port to the front, 1,000 miles of country, and I felt like we didn't really have that problem.
Yeah,
right? We had so much supply that I could generally do what I wanted to do. I think maybe 3 to 5 would probably be enough, but I see what you're saying.
I'd like to see more. Only because then,
Well, it puts some real premium on them.
yeah, which makes those decisions that much more
Yep.
valuable and like tasty. And like you could just
Yeah.
make that an optional rule. Hey, here's the
Sure,
here's the
a
20-point
variant.
game.
Yep.
Here's the 16-point
down to
game
15
or whatever.
or what-
Here's
yeah.
the 12-point game. Like
Yeah.
that would be a really easy way, just as an option, to like ratchet it up and
Yeah.
to change kind of what you do.
But remember, it is an auto loss if you ever get counterattacked and you can't
yes.
sacrifice a block. I'm
And I
just
was-
saying,
and I was
don't make it
never
too
afraid of that.
I know, but just
Never.
don't make it too few because then
Then
the strategy
but
is
then
gonna
it can
change.
actually happen.
Well, that's true.
And that's
It's
what I want to
true.
see. There was, we talked about this. There was just not enough jeopardy in some
Yeah.
of the decision points. And so
Yeah.
give me an option for those. Because what we were doing was fine. And I think for a lot of people who were this could be your first war game
Well,
very easily.
I think
And
what
it's
we
great.
did was fun and interesting.
Mechanics are fun.
Yeah, I just think there needs to be. We kept saying Jeopardy.
We've played a lot of war games.
Yes,
and it's
we
like,
have.
Give me the options to make it harder and harder
Yes,
and harder.
yeah.
Because then we're getting into stuff that's like, oh, this is like,
Yeah,
the painful
100%.
decisions that not everyone wants in a game,
Yep.
but are such an easy option to put in with what they've already
Yeah,
got.
I would agree with that.
That's just like, give me a page of optional rules that's like,
Yeah.
They could just elevate it
Well,
for
look-
experienced players.
Let's talk about the combat system because I thought it was pretty unique and interesting. I think the rules were fairly well written, although it took us a moment to kind of get our heads around it.
Yeah, so
Nothing overly
It looks
complex.
like there's a lot of steps.
Yeah, these are
the
the play
reality
aids.
is there's not, but there's just a few different ways that your logistics blocks can be. If they're standing up, you can do kind of whatever you want with them. If they're already face up, basically, because you have
They've
used them
revealed,
already,
yeah.
there's some limitations to what you can do with them. And so it lists all those.
Yep.
But then you commit a number of cubes, either 1 or 2. 1, you get the value on the logistics block is your combat value. 2 is you get double the value if you're the attacker, unless you're the Germans. If you're the attacker, you have to commit 2, but you don't get double. So there's some like little bits and pieces, and they give you a little table for that.
Yep.
But you have to remember, like, this is for the attacker only. When the Germans are defending, they commit only one block.
And it says it right there, step 3, the attacker.
You just
so
can't,
that's the attacker.
the first time you play through a combat, don't rush it.
Yep.
Because you want to make sure you just, like, you're getting all the steps right. And it's like, attacker does this, defender does this. And all the combats favor the attacker, which is what 100%. You would expect in one of these racing style games, right? This downfall style. So I don't begrudge the game that. But like you get a couple of these different German defensive assets, and it's like I happen to be defending in a bad terrain with a fort. Maybe I'll commit to like a counterattack, is what they're called, and I'll stick around another turn.
Yeah.
And that can make a big difference, right?
It can be backbreaking.
It kind of sucks.
You did that twice to me, and ultimately I think that's why I didn't get where I needed to get immediately.
But yeah,
and that's fine.
But the combat it's not complicated, which I appreciate. You know, it's for the defender. It's like I have
a
guy.
Unit. That's
any
one.
amount of guys, I get one.
You could have 2 guys there. It's still just 1.
Yeah. The defensive terrain is printed on the map if there is any, and it is a
1 or
number,
2,
which is nice. If I'm attacking across a river, defender gets another +1.
And those are blue.
Yep.
Very clear.
Very clear.
And it's things like the Rhine and the Oder and the Vista. I mean, those are the rivers that you're crossing.
Yeah,
historical
the
big
major ones.
Major rivers.
And then if you have a defensive logistic block, you pay 1 of your cubes and you get that value. And that's it for and then the attacker, theirs is you commit 1, you get the value, you commit 2, you get double the value. And that's pretty much it.
Or you can use one of your, I think there are 5 cards.
So you do all that, then you reveal everything. Then the attacker can be like, okay, I'm going to commit a tank.
Which adds +1.
It adds the number of cubes that
+2.
you committed to it. Or if you only committed 1 cube to it, you can use the supply truck. Wherever I put it, I don't know what I did with mine. It's right here. And the supply truck does the doubling. So if you only had 1 cube to commit, you can do the doubling with the card. Although, like the Soviets only have 1 of those. So you've got to be careful when you use that. And so you then get those values. You know, I have like an 8, and you have
a 4.
Yeah, or a 2.
More often than not, it's 2 or 3.
And so then you roll dice, and you add the dice to it. I like this as dice mechanic.
Yeah, it's very fun.
In most games.
Yeah.
And so you roll 2d6, and you subtract the lower number from the higher number.
So you rolled a 5 and a 2, which is not a 7, it's a 3.
Yes,
the difference.
It's the differential.
I rolled a 6 and a 2, it's not an 8, it's a 4.
Yeah, you roll a 6 and a 6, it's a 0.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Which happened occasionally. Not a 6 and a 6, but double numbers.
So I ended up as like an 11, and you ended up as a 1, 2...
5, 6.
Right? And that's how a lot of the combats are.
Yep.
And so when we talk about there's not a ton of jeopardy, it's because it's really easy for the attacker to stack numbers.
Yep.
And to break the defenders back. And then as they continue to push them back, the defenders just get weaker and weaker and weaker typically.
Yep.
And so they're like defending in the open, there's no river, and it's just 1 guy now.
Yeah.
And so they're like, this defense of 1.
Yeah.
And so then I don't have to double myself. I just put 1 cube. I'm a 4, you're a 1. I'm most likely going to roll a 1. You're most likely going to roll a 1 or a 2.
Yep.
And so like the combats start to snowball. And so that's a good game effect where you get the 2 sides and like, there's some difficult stuff here at the beginning, or it's easy and then it gets difficult, and you kind of brush them aside.
Yeah.
But it's almost too much disparity between the attacker and defender.
Well, we talked about the very cool mechanic of highest die minus lowest die. That's really good.
I like that as an averaging mechanic in almost every other game.
Yeah, it leads to a 1 or a 2 8 out of 10 times. We talked, maybe you just do a d6.
Yeah, because then it's more random.
Right. I can roll a 6, you can roll a 1, and I can win.
But that gives the defender a little bit of a shot, because at the moment, the defender's lost, I'm going to say, 90% of the combat.
I would agree.
Right?
I think I stopped you here.
You stopped me here.
And I thought one other place, and you stopped me one time.
I stopped, so I had those counterattack cards.
Yes.
So
was that the only reason you stopped? I beat you, but you stopped me.
You beat me
You
every
had double.
time.
You had double the counter
But
attack.
I stopped, and then you got me that third time. And
which was big.
Yeah.
That
but
was
like,
big.
That's just it. But like the reality is there's the defenders are so difficult.
Yeah.
And it's like maybe if they could do like something.
Yeah.
Just
or
like
maybe
one
or maybe the defender, because you're prepared, you're in your home territory. Maybe you get a D6, and then the attacker does the averaging. That might also be. I'm not trying to re-engineer the game here, but I feel like I wanted more jeopardy in the combat. I felt like I was going to win almost every single time when I attacked.
And I was almost never worried about it.
Yeah, I would agree.
And you know, part of it is that a big part of that comes down to block placement, and we placed our blocks in ways that were very reasonable.
Yeah.
But
sure,
you could mess up your block placement. It's possible.
You could, sure.
But considering it's Race to Berlin, we all know where the good blocks are going.
Right.
It's not down in Italy. So,
well, here's the other thing I would say about that. Strategically, there's really, in my opinion, two ways to get to Berlin from the east, right? It's here or it's here, right? It's just
and one of those is much shorter than the other.
I agree. But this one's 3, this one's 2, and that's why I'm saying there's really only 2 spots. I'm not going to go from down here. That's too far.
I'm not even going from here. This is way too far.
But that might be where you put your 5 here, knowing that your enemy put his 5 up there. Maybe you do that, right?
But then every 5 you commit here is a 5 you don't have on the, and so
100%.
And that's the beauty of the game. Right?
It is. That is part of what
decision space
is good.
Is great.
Yeah. Would that work out? I'm not sure.
I want more
we gotta try
of that.
Sure.
I think is what I'm looking for.
Well, and we also talked about maybe having maybe everybody has one block that's kind of that wild card. In addition to the dummy, maybe you have the one command block that it's a base 2, but you add a D6 and it could be a 3.
Or you would do it's a 1 plus D6 to bring it in line with the...
Whatever.
But
you don't want it to be too much.
But like, something that's simple as that, right?
Yeah.
Can make a big difference.
It would.
Because then you get that one
jeopardy.
Heroic defensive stand, and that can make a big knock-on effect.
Sure.
And in this, most of the defenses had no knock-on effect.
I agree.
Which, I get it. That's what the game is. That's why it's an hour to 90 minutes.
Yep.
I understand that there's an element of that, but like you could make that like an optional piece, an optional component.
Right.
Just if you wanted something additional as well.
But I do like the combat system. I think it's unique and interesting. There's just not enough jeopardy in it, I don't think. I love the command blocks. The production on this sucker is amazing.
Yeah, so
beautiful.
For reference, this is, I presume, like a pre-production style.
I would assume it's going to be very similar to this.
But yeah, it's
really
beautiful.
Nice. Yep.
I hope they do plastic dice.
I kind of like the wooden.
I generally just don't like wooden dice.
Okay.
Although these are the nicest.
They're heavier.
Wooden
They're
dice.
heavier.
Well, they're like printed nicely as well.
Yeah, they're really nice.
But yeah, the components, when you brought it over, I'm like, oh dang. Like, this is so bougie for like a victory point. But it's so nice.
It is very nice.
And you have the front, and this looks great on a table.
It does. Well, I feel like I'm an overall commander looking at the whole operation in its totality.
And I also like the feeling of a game like this where, because it plays quickly and the pace of it's pretty fast, when you move your front, you're like, all the pieces move.
Yeah.
And you see visual progress very quickly.
Yep.
And that's very rewarding. You get that dopamine hit of like, oh, my front moved.
Yeah,
oh,
it's cool.
Like, and it looks awesome and it feels awesome to like make a lot of progress quickly. That's, because we'll play a game for like 4 hours, and that was like one turn, and it's like, pieces moved 4 hexes.
Yeah, right.
That's a lot of what happens.
You got
here,
some
like,
sweeping movement.
Yeah, which is great. It just feels great.
Yeah. Well, it's a scale thing, right? This is
but the game is it's a pacey game.
Yeah.
You move guys, you do a combat, you take a space.
Yep.
You do the same thing. I do the same, and it's so like it's going and going, and you're racing up here, and I'm like, oh dang, he's making a lot of progress.
Yeah.
I got to do the same thing, and you're trying to match it, and
Yep.
and it does that in a space that doesn't take very long. That's the reality of it. And so they did a good job of that. That's for sure.
Yep. Well, once again, I think the name of the game should tell you what the game is.
If you're not doing that,
it really does. If you're not racing to Berlin, you're not playing the game well.
I think you will
my
lose
opinion.
the game.
Yeah, but that's okay There's a lot of sideshow down here that you can mess around with and have a good time. I had a great time. I had a great time doing it, but you kicked my butt, right? You destroyed me. And that's just the way it is, right? The other thing, the only other comment that I want to make is I very much enjoyed the little mini board that, you had the Berlin board. Now there's not a ton to it.
Yeah, I hope that they figure out a way to not have it like just kind of over there.
Sure.
Like
it would have been nice to maybe have it
make
here.
the board a little bigger and like have a space for it here, because it was a lot of reaching, and I was like, oh, I'll just put it up to the side, but I'm like, man, that's kind of reaching.
Yep. But the Berlin board has really 5 spaces, the center of Berlin, and then the 4 outside. The Soviets have 2 approaches to Berlin. The Western Allies have 2 approaches. I can't go into B3. You couldn't go into B4. I don't know how you would get in there, right?
You can't.
You can't.
That's the whole point.
But they have defensive values written there. You have to go into the board, attack into the board, then you have to, you reside in the board, and then you have to attack into Berlin.
And then just grind down whoever's there.
Because there can be 3 units there, that's written on the board, and that could mean 12 steps.
Yeah, if
3,
they
4
were
step
all maxed,
units.
and that's a long
A lot.
time.
There also was, I thought, a very cool historic rule regarding the 6th SS Panzer, where once they're defeated,
well,
I'm sorry, at the end of turn 1, at the end of turn 1, if they're still alive, you can put this unit anywhere that you have another.
So they start on the West
German
front under my control.
Yeah.
They get pulled off. I presume it's historical. They were literally taken off this front and sent to fight the Soviets. And so my counter comes off and your one goes on.
Yeah.
And you put it on.
I thought that was neat because that gave me some opportunity to potentially reinforce Berlin, or even reinforce an area where you were approaching where maybe I didn't have a guy. But remember, having 2 or 3 guys in 1 hex doesn't give you any extra benefit in the combat resolution.
Yeah.
It just gives you more body bags to accept hits and survive.
But you almost always retreat. And so it only becomes body bags when you get into B1 in Berlin.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed. But I did like the board. I thought it was unique and interesting. I agree. I would like to see it like up here in Denmark, Copenhagen, where there's nothing going on. Just superimpose that there, and then it's easier to reach.
Yeah.
But
I think every other game would have made that part of it overwrought, or like put in a bunch of extra stuff. It's still really streamlined.
Yeah, agreed.
Whilst maintaining, without allowing the Germans to do anything that's stupid, basically.
Right.
Like being in Berlin as a final stand and then like fighting their way out and recapturing the entirety of Germany. They basically can't do that once they make their final stand in Berlin.
Yeah. Player aid was also very good.
Yes, it was very good. I was impressed with that.
Were a couple of rules kind of ambiguities.
Yes.
The biggest one I thought was in Berlin, it does not say that because in the game, when you have a combat, the loser always retreats.
Yes.
Or the loser just stops if you were attacking, right?
Right.
If you're the defender, you always have to retreat.
Yeah, with the exception of if there's a fort,
if
there's a fort like the big forts,
the 2-level fort,
you use the counterattack.
Yep.
Right, and the rules say that's what happens.
Yep.
You take a step loss and you retreat.
In Berlin, there's an entire section on Berlin. It does not ever say whether they retreat or whether they don't retreat. It's just silent on the matter. So if you're silent, you would think that the standing rule, but that doesn't make sense. So
So it's, to me, from the game standpoint, it's obvious
that they
stand and fight and they don't ever retreat.
Agreed.
But it doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that.
And so, the only retreat, the only rules say if the defender loses, they always retreat.
Yeah.
And they made this whole Berlin section of the rules
right there.
And all they needed was a sentence that says defenders never retreat on Berlin. They make a little final stand.
Yep.
Like but they just neglected to do that.
Yep. It's also interesting. The other, I think, ambiguity regarding Berlin was blue units, German units were mine. Red German units are yours.
Yeah.
Or wait. No, you were blue.
Because I'm red.
Yeah, right. It never really said, do they fight together? Or do you, when you're the Soviets attacking, do you just attack the blue guys?
No, you have to kill everyone. But
it wasn't really clear.
So it is
what I'm saying. Okay.
But it's not in the combat section.
Right.
Like that rule.
That's what I meant.
That rule is on page 8.
There you go.
During the setup.
Yeah, maybe that should have been near combat.
They don't mention it at all in the combat. So there's a couple bits and pieces like that. And this is, they got plenty of time
they'll make
to
some changes.
Shuffle those things around.
I think I want to point those out because they really didn't detract from my enjoyment of the game.
No, what I was doing was fun.
I very much enjoyed what we were doing, how we were doing it. I think as we play again, we're going to experience or try different things. Maybe they'll be different, maybe they won't, but we will definitely try to experience something different. I think we're still going to go for Berlin.
I will still race for Berlin because I want to win.
Agreed. But we might put, we talked about it, like my defensive strategy on the East Front might be, I'm going to put a 4 block here, maybe a 5 block back here to allow me more opportunity to defend better, because me putting a 2 block over here, you just ran right over it.
Yeah, it was worse that you put it there.
Yeah,
It would have been better to use that as an offensive block.
100%. So I think we discussed some of that, so I'd love to try some more of that and see how that hampers my offensive side, but whether or not it really truly slows you.
Yeah, is it actually effective?
And if it does slow you, maybe that's a different way I need to look at it. But to me, Alexander, that's what's good about this game.
Yes.
You can try those things, and I think you're going to have plausible outcomes, plausible opportunities to do certain things, and I think it can make a difference.
Yeah, there's a lot of replay in the logistics blocks
100%.
and how you set those up, because the setup totally changes how you go about prosecuting things.
Yep.
And that's what I go back to, is like, give me a dummy block, give me a +1 random block.
Just,
you could do all sorts of things with that.
Sure.
And it would just give you so many options and zhuzh it up in a way that could be give you even more replay.
And if you don't want to make that the part of the base game, make it as an alternate.
Very easy.
A variant. Make it a stretch goal where if it does well, then you are going to make a couple of random special blocks. I think that would be cool. I really do. Or consider different victory point values for certain areas. Or the other thing I was thinking about as we were playing, part of the reason this area was important, the soft underbelly, right, was Hitler didn't want to give this up because he didn't want all those Allied units coming from all over.
Sure, there was also a lot of manufacturing down in Munich.
Well, yeah, this is an important area. It's important. So that's why I'm like, maybe when these areas are held by you as the Western German, you get a +1 on defense. Something like that might have made it a little more incentivized to go for.
The reality is, we did nothing down here.
We really did.
All just get to Berlin as quick as possible and win, and that's
how
the game is right now.
I do think, hey, if you hold this spot, you get a +1 on defense. That, to me, makes sense, right? Or even on your counterattacks, something like that.
Or it's like, you hold it and it's +1 in this space and every adjacent space.
Yeah,
maybe you could do something like that. I don't know.
It wouldn't be game breaking, but it potentially would make those a little more important.
Yeah, I think.
Just my opinion.
I had a blast with what we were doing. It was fun and it was engaging. But I'm like, I'd like to see a few little tweaks and sand off the rough edges. On some of those things, and then you'd have a real banger for a lot of people.
100%. Yeah.
We can play this having played, a billion war games, but you could teach this to someone who's never played a war game very, very easy.
Yep. I think that's what this really appeals to, right? It's going to be an entry-level war game, but it does have some cool strategy, so a grognard's going to be interested and be captivated by it. If you throw in some variant rules or alternative rules, I think it will make it that much better.
Yeah, I agree. So, Race to Berlin, coming from Portal Games, I had a blast with it, that's for sure.
I did too.
I just want to see more,
Any game that I can play and I'm still talking about it several hours later, that to me is it's a good game, right? It did what it was supposed to do.
Agreed. But check this out if you're interested. Appreciate you tuning in. I'm Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.